Yum-Kimil is the Mayan god of death. He is frequently represented as a skeleton. Common depictions include Yum-Kimil holding a head at his waist. He is also often shown surrounded by serpents. These images reflect the Mayan cultural fear of death as an active and inescapable force. The serpent often functions as a symbolic guardian of thresholds. This role signifies its connection to transitional spaces and boundaries. Specifically, the serpent's constriction symbolizes a transition. This transition is from the realm of the living to the dark realm. In Mayan mythology, this dark realm is associated with Yum-Kimil, the god of death. The serpent embodies the crossing into death and the afterlife. When you are in the underworld, you float, utterly disoriented. The darkness doesn't break, it festers. The cold green-blue glow of foxfire begins to bleed through the gray silt. It is the noticeable conduit designed to carry the most volatile form of the neon glowing mushrooms. This light doesn't warm the skin, it audits it. It makes your veins look like black ink and your skin like translucent parchment. This is the light of the spent batch. It is the glow of energy that has been stolen by decay. It is the proof of Yum-Kimil's power. He doesn't need a sun because he harvests the ghost light from the bones of those who failed the count. As a neon glowing nightmare, Yum-Kimil provides his own light, a sickly, cold, green-blue glow that is the opposite of the warm, golden light of the sun. Yum-Kimil isn't just a skeleton. He is the lumberjack of bones. His own body is the material from which the dark world tree is built. To the Maya, the spine was the hinge of the human body, just as the world tree was the hinge of the universe or the axis mundi of Xibalba. It is a jagged, calcified pillar that stretches upward toward the 9th floor. Every rib is a branch of the dark world tree, and hanging from these bone branches are the eye bells, vibrating in the foxfire light. He is the lumberjack because he is constantly pruning the lineages of man. When a soul is siphoned down, he harvests their spine to add another notch to his own, lengthening the dark tree. The snake provides the moisture and protection, while the mushrooms provide the bioluminescent heat. From the outside, you see the snake's ribs acting as a cage of light. The mushrooms pulse in rhythm with the snake's heart, sending waves of neon gold or violet through its scales. It looks like a flexible lantern made of muscle and venom. As the snake slithers through the gray siphon, it exhales the spores of these mushrooms. This creates a microclimate around the sacrifice. It's a pocket of fermentation that prevents the siphon from drying out the seeker's red tie. If the snake is threatened, it can constrict its own midsection, crushing a cluster of mushrooms inside its gut. This causes a blinding flare of light, a solar flash that can momentarily stun the lords of Xibalba. The snake represents the hinge in motion. Its spine is flexible, unlike the petrified spine of Yum-Kimil. By carrying the mushrooms inside the snake, the sacrifice was carrying a portable ferment. Without them, you are no longer a contained batch. You are a spill. And in the throne room, Yum-Kimil is the one who mops up the spills. Yum-Kimil symbolizes the cold, lifeless remains after death. His depiction focuses on the post-mortem state. The imagery involves the absence of muscle and skin. This emphasizes the stark reality of what physically remains. The representation highlights the undeniable truth of mortality. Yum-Kimil is visually represented as the embodiment of rotting flesh. His depiction includes a bloated stomach, symbolizing decay. He is also shown with black death spots, further emphasizing putrefaction. These visual elements collectively highlight the theme of decomposition. The iconography focuses on the process of decay and the imagery of death. Yum-Kimil's throne is constructed from human femurs. Human skin replaces the traditional jaguar skin throne. Alternatively, his seat might be a pillowcase made of an enlarged human torso. These visual elements emphasize Yum Kimil's dominion over death. Young Kimil is often depicted with a black mask. Alternatively, he may have black circles around his eyes. These visual cues are known as the Akab sign. This feature is wrapped around Yum Kimil's obsidian eyes, ringed by the blackest circles, Akab. They called it the sediment of night, the heavy silt left behind when darkness poured from its jar. Yum Kimil's skeletal face, a canvas stained by this perpetual twilight, held a gaze that defied mere sight. It was an application of gravity, a warping of the very physics of the temple. When those Akab-ringed eyes locked on, the air thickened, becoming viscous and resistant. A red tie felt the tug of an unseen anchor. Each movement labored, each breath a struggle. Twilight bled into the periphery, a creeping darkness that promised submersion. It wasn't observation. It was an immersion into his reality, a slow, inexorable drowning in the rising night. To meet the Akab was to confront the abyss, to understand that the darkness wasn't descending, it was ascending, claiming its due tax. But in Xibalba, sight will falter, and other senses will surge. All who venture in are plugging into the architecture of the deep. All the heaviness in their eyes wasn't just gravity. It was the crushing atmospheric pressure of the 9th level. The imagery on Yum Kimil's cheek is often depicted as closed eyes or skeletal sockets. They represent the blindness of the dead as compared to the sight of the living. This diagonal slash, call of a hinge, represents the threshold or the road to Xibalba. Instead of a tattoo, a cauterized scar can take its place. Since it's on his cheek, it's as if he has signed the person's face, claiming their soul for his vats. When the Mayan elders watch over the skin of a sick man, he counts the yellowing of the eyes, the trembling of the hands, but only when the percentage sign appears on the cheek does he stop the medicine. Thus, the sick man's tally is closed. In Mayan art, the sun is usually drawn with a kin glyph, a 4-petaled flower, and the moon is drawn with a U shape, representing a crescent or a rabbit in a bowl. The dots on the man's cheek are purposefully blank. They represent the extinguished eyes. To the Maya, the sun and moon are seeing. The dots on the death mark are unseeing. They show that the man's earthly vision has been tally-marked and closed. Yum Kimil is sometimes depicted smoking a cigar in visual representations. The visual iconography often uses the nose to symbolize breath and life. Yum Kimil's depiction contrasts with this symbolism. He is drawn with a truncated nose. The truncated nose is skeletal, resembling a nose hole. This visual cue emphasizes the absence of life. The truncated nose serves as a symbolic representation of death. The water lily serves as a visual icon, representing the emergence of life from death. It symbolizes life's ability to rise above adverse conditions. The flower's growth from dark waters towards the sun embodies this concept. The water lily growing out of Yum Kimil's head reinforces the theme of life overcoming death. As Yum Kimil is the god of death, he is often depicted wearing a water lily. The water lily symbolizes his role as a connector. It represents a portal between the living and the dead. The water lily emerges from Yum Kimil's skeletal head, representing its unique life cycle. It grows in dead water, symbolizing its origin in decay and decomposition. The lily reaches for the sun, signifying aspiration and the pursuit of life. The water lily symbolizes the transformation of decay into something life-sustaining and beautiful. Yum Kimil transforms the soul's raw fruit into divine wine for ancestors. This transformation is akin to a controlled fermentation process. The maceration process manages decay to produce something valuable. It is a controlled decomposition leading to a refined offering. Yum Kimil is also recognized as the flatulent one. This deity has a specific shape that associates this nickname of the flatulent one. The associated characteristic is a bloated belly, visually representing his nature. The flatulent one title connects him to unpleasant odors. Specifically, he is linked to the foul smell of death. This association extends to the stench of decay, further defining his symbolic role. The water lily possesses a strong, sweet fragrance. This fragrance is exploited as a form of deception. The scent masks the unpleasant odor of a grave. This olfactory trickery lures unsuspecting individuals into the underworld. The water lily serves as a symbolic hinge between life and death. It represents the intersection of vitality and decay. The sweet scent of life contrasts with the cold rot of the underworld. This contrast creates a liminal space. The water lily embodies this transitional state between worlds. The Maya civilization at Palenque undertook significant hydraulic engineering projects. One notable feat was the diversion of the Ochilam River. The river was redirected to flow directly beneath the palace. The diverted river also passed near the Temple of the Inscriptions. This diversion was intended to maintain a constant water presence near the king's tomb. The Maya transformed pyramids into symbolic representations of their cosmology. Water was channeled through the limestone foundations of the pyramid. This process effectively turned the pyramid into a water lily monster. The water lily symbolized the Earth's position, floating on a primordial sea. The lily's roots were understood to extend into Xibalba, the Mayan underworld. Thus, the pyramid became a powerful symbol connecting the earthly realm with the spiritual. Yum Kimil is frequently depicted with specific symbolic objects. A common attribute is the presence of paper or magi fiber strips. These strips were historically used for bloodletting rituals. Bloodletting was a significant aspect of sacrificial practices. Therefore, these strips visually connect Yum Kimil to the act of ritual sacrifice. This iconography reinforces his association with death and the underworld. Magi thorns are used as visual elements connected to ritual practices. These thorns are depicted piercing Yum Kimil's ears. They are also shown piercing Yum Kimil's tongue. This iconography symbolizes self-sacrifice. The piercing of the ears and tongue with magi thorns emphasizes Yum Kimil's role in ritualistic acts. These depictions visually link Yum Kimil to the concepts of sacrifice and ritual performance. Yum Kimil is depicted as the master of fermentation in visual iconography. His role involves transforming the raw fruit of the human soul. This transformation results in the creation of the divine wine of the ancestors. The process of fermentation symbolizes a link between death and transformation. This connection signifies a cyclical process of change and renewal. Therefore, Yum Kimil embodies the alchemical process of converting base elements into something sacred. Yum Kimil's realm represents the burial place of the maize god. In this context, death is symbolic of planting a seed. This symbolism emphasizes the concept of rebirth and regeneration. The burial of the maize god is thus a metaphor for new life emerging from death. The obsidian mirror serves as a visual icon representing transformation. Gazing into the mirror in darkness reveals Yum Kimil. This reflection symbolizes that everyone is Yum Kimil in disguise. The concept suggests a latent potential for change within each individual. The mirror signifies the anticipation of an impending personal transformation. The owl functions as a messenger for Yum Kimil. Yum Kimil is associated with death. The owl symbolizes death's silent nature. The owl's nocturnal habits connected to the hunt for souls. Therefore, the owl embodies death's pursuit of souls in the night. Yum Kimil's movement operates on inverse logic between different realms. His actions are reversed when transitioning between worlds. To approach the living world, he must move away in his own realm. This demonstrates a fundamental principle of inverted logic in his character. The sound of copper jingling is a visual and auditory cue. In a sick room, the faint jingle of copper indicates Yum Kimil's arrival. The sound, usually associated with festivity, transforms into an omen of misfortune. This auditory cue signals impending doom or negative events. The copper jingle becomes a harbinger of bad news within the context of illness. The eye necklace is a visual element worn by Yum Kimil. The necklace is composed of human eyes. The eyes symbolize a loss of sensory awareness. The eyes also represent a loss of autonomy. These losses are associated with death. Priests sometimes impersonated Yum Kimil in specific rituals. This impersonation was a form of visual iconography. The purpose was to instill terror in participants. It also served as a reminder of death's power. The Satansat is a cold still. It is designed to suck the heat, life, out of anyone who enters. Before entering, the seeker keeps the stone tucked against their skin, usually near the red tie, the heart. The stone absorbs the seeker's blood. Once inside the deep dark, the stone acts as a heat sink. When the seeker feels their spirit beginning to flash freeze from the cold of the underworld, they touch the stone to remember the sun-drenched silt of home. At the Satansat's entrance, seekers would bring some non-local stones, volcanic basalt or river jade, and they would leave the stone at the entrance of chambers that are purely limestone. The seeker gripped the stone until it was slick with sweat. It wasn't just a rock. It was a compressed tally of every tortilla they had ever eaten, and every ancestor who had fertilized their field. These are the spent decoys of seekers who traveled from distant cities to perform the labyrinth walk. Each stone is a noticeable record of a successfully filtered soul. This is a kex, is a substitution. This is a piece of static silt as a tally, so that the seeker's liquid soul may pass through the intestines unchecked. The Satansat is a 3-level maze located inside a pyramid structure. This labyrinth is designed to represent an artificial Xibalba. Initiates would enter the dark Satansat as part of a ritual or trial. Inside, they confronted the symbolic darkness of Yum Kimil. The Satansat served as a physical simulation of the soul's trial. During the equinox, light enters the Satansat through small air vents. These vents provide a pathway for escape from the Satansat interior. Following the light is crucial for finding a way out. Failure to follow the light results in being consumed by the dark. Being consumed by the dark symbolizes spiritual failure. The light represents guidance, while darkness signifies a loss of direction. Yum Kimil's realm is characterized by inversion. In this realm, directional orientations are reversed. Left becomes right. Similarly, vertical orientations are inverted. Up becomes down. Objects that are broken in the living world are considered whole in Yum Kimil's realm. This allows spirits to utilize these whole objects within this inverted world. Yum Kimil is known as the one who counts the hair. He is obsessed with numbers and calculations. Yum Kimil functions as the cosmic auditor. He monitors breaths, hairs, and maize kernels to ensure no energy is stolen from the cosmic machine. In the great vat of the universe, Yum Kimil is the sediment, the lees, that settle at the bottom of the batch once all life and heat have been drained. He is the guardian of the gray silt. While the 12 lords of Xibalba are active predators who siphon the energy of the living, Yum Kimil is the passive end. He is what remains when the fermentation is over. Yum Kimil waits for his copper bells to go silent. The bells ring as long as there is movement or heat in the system. He waits for the knives to finish their work, because when the last red tie is shredded, the vibration stops. Total silence is his ultimate goal, the sign that the fermentation has been completely purged and only the gray silt remains. While the 12 lords want to play the ball game to steal the player's energy, Camille is waiting for the game to fail entirely. He waits for the moment the world tree stops siphoning and the Bacabs finally let go. He is the cleanup crew of the apocalypse. He is waiting for the universe to be reduced to a pile of bleached, silent geometry that he can stack in his cellar. This is the absolute bottom of the vat, a place of zero humidity and perfect silence, where Camille sits to count the leftovers of the universe. 9 of each houses, before Camille's throne, is a physical filter designed to strain out the life force, the its, until only the bone is left for the king of the dead. The river of corruption, a thick, gelatinous flow of bitter sap that sticks to the skin, dragging the traveler's frequency down. The river of blood, not living blood, but stagnant, sour red tie that has failed to ferment. The house of gloom, total sensory deprivation. This is where the lost clarity begins to take hold, making the traveler forget the design of Hunahpu. The house of cold, a thermal vacuum. This level sucks the heat out of the traveler's core. If they freeze here, they become a wooden mannequin. The house of jaguars, where the predators of the batch tear at the spirit, testing if the flesh is strong enough to remain a living batch. The house of fire, a false heat. It is a dry, searing flame that tries to evaporate the traveler's remaining moisture, their its, without ripening them. The house of bats, chemizots, the guillotine level. The bats seek to sever the hinge, the neck, separating the mind from the body. The sifting sands, a transitional tunnel of gray silt. The traveler must crawl through the pulverized remains of previous failed creations. The House of Knives is located on the 9th level of the underworld. It serves as a place of karmic retribution for those who lived a greedy life. In this realm, individuals arrive burdened with a debt that must be repaid. Residence in the House of Knives is mandatory until the debt is fully settled. This system represents a form of karmic justice, balancing past actions. The throne room of Camille does not resemble a palace of gold or stone. It resembles the inside of a fossilized lung. It is the place where the breath of the universe has finally been held and turned to stone. To the eye of the fermentation process, the throne room resembles the bottom of a dry vat. The walls are not made of bricks, but of compressed ash and gray silt. They are noticeably porous, like bone, designed to suck any remaining moisture, out of the air. There is no fire or sun. The room is lit by the lost clarity, a cold, spectral luminescence that comes from the bleached bones of the previous world, ages embedded in the floor. The room is a perfect circle, representing the 0 of the tally. Directly above the throne is the drain of the House of Knives, looking like a distant, swirling eye of obsidian shards. The Wayub acts as the animal spirit counterparts, and they are in a state of suspended fermentation. In the throne room, they cannot roam free. Instead, they are seen as bas reliefs or frozen shadows on the walls. As the sacrifice walks toward Camille, they see the shadows of jaguars, toads, and serpents flickering on the silt walls. These are the Wayub of the failed batches. They look like they are trapped behind a thin layer of translucent resin. They are quieted. If the sacrifice still has heat, their own Wayub will appear as a vibrant, pulsing silhouette against the cold gray of the room. The dead Wayub on the walls will vibrate, and the resonance will be hungering for the sacrifice's red tie to restart their own stalled tally. Then there will be the sound of the thousands of eye bells hanging from the ceiling of Camille's throne room. A frantic, shimmering clink, clink, clink that sounds like 1,000 obsidian needles hitting glass. This represents the white vapor and the thoughts of Hunahpu. When these bells ring, it means the design is still being written. It is the proof the high alcohol content of the spirit. This is the sound of the Wayab and the sacrifice's own red tide pulsing in the dark. A deep, wet thump hiss, resembling the sound of a fermentation vat bubbling or a heavy heart beating against ribs. This is the sound of heat. It provides the tempo for the song. If this rhythm slows down, the world becomes a wooden mannequin. If it speeds up, the batch is ripening. The hinge grind of Xibalba. This is the sound of the world tree's roots vibrating against the limestone. A low, metallic growl, like massive stones being rubbed together or a copper gong being struck underwater. This is the sound of the hinge turning. It is the anchor that keeps the song from flying apart. It is the sound of the 12 lords being forced to stay in their place while the fermentation rises. When these 3 layers align, it creates the bell song. To someone standing in the throne room, it doesn't sound like music, it sounds like pressure. The air becomes noticeably thick. You can see the sound waves moving through the humid sip like ripples in honey. The song is so loud it vibrates the bone. It forces the gray silt on the floor to dance in geometric patterns called the quincunx. This triune song is the only thing that can blind Yum Kimmel. He is a creature of silence and 0. The bell song is a 1 that repeats forever. As long as the bell song plays, he cannot close his tally book. He is paralyzed by the noise of life, while Yum Kimmel is locked by the frequency of the bells. The sacrifice approaches the throne. Even at this point, the sacrifice. They do not kill the god of death. You cannot kill endings, but they confiscate his tools. The sacrifice snaps the tally stick or wipes the gray silt from the accounting tablet. By doing this, they reset the count. They effectively tell the universe, this batch is not finished. The fermentation continues. The sacrifice performs a mystical, noticeable act. They touch the petrified root of the world tree, the throne itself. The red tie, their boiling high-pressure blood, flows from their fingertips into the dry white stone of the underworld. The red heat travels back up the roots like a reverse siphon. This sends a shockwave of heat through all 9 levels of Xibalba, momentarily turning the House of Cold into a steam room and the House of Knives into a forge. The sacrifice signals the way of both their own and the frozen shadows on the walls. With a shout that matches the high percussion of the bells, the sacrifice commands the Wayab to leap from the walls and become the engine of ascent. The shadows wrap around the sacrifice, forming a living shell of animal spirit and fermented vapor. As the sacrifice is lifted back through the drain, the obsidian blades of the 9th floor are still spinning. The Wayab wrap around the sacrifice in a chained sip of spirit matter. The blades hit this shadow, shield and shatter, or simply hum in harmony with the bell song. The sacrifice is moving so fast that the levels of Xibalba become a blur of gray-gold light. In a mystical context, a red tie symbolizes a critical hinge point for the spirit. This symbol becomes relevant when powerful sorcerers or priests enter a dreaming state. During such dreams, their soul metaphorically bleeds into the real world. The red tie functions as a tourniquet, attempting to control this spiritual leakage. It serves to tether the human and beast aspects of the dreamer's soul. This tethering action maintains a balance and prevents complete spiritual diffusion. The Wayab are ancient ancestors of shapeshifters. Their arrival is signaled by the silencing of natural sounds. This silence is replaced by the inverse sound of Xibalba. The inverse sound heralds the presence of the Wayab. Wayab manifests as creatures that defy natural geometry. These creatures often exhibit unnatural physical characteristics. One example is a jaguar with thinly stretched skin. The creature is lit by an unnatural, sickly green fire. It may also wear incongruous items, such as a red necktie. Mayan art often depicts Wayab, supernatural beings with connections to the spirit world. These depictions provide insights into Mayan beliefs about the underworld and its inhabitants. A common artistic element is a redneck scarf. worn by Wayab figures. This scarf is not merely decorative. It symbolizes a tether or link to the underworld. The red scarf visually represents the Wayab's ability to traverse and interact with the spirit realm. Vukub Kakix is a monstrous bird figure in mythology. He is distinguished by his emerald feathers and jewel-encrusted teeth. Vukub Kakis is also known as the false sun. His rejection of the red tie symbolizes a refusal of cosmic duties, embodying the concept of pride. An eerie silence blankets the jungle night. Even the cicadas have ceased their chorus. From the shadows, a jaguar emerges, its ribs starkly visible beneath its taut skin. Around the jaguar's neck, a bright red tie pulses with an unnatural internal light. The jaguar stares, its eyes burning with a haunting, unsettling awareness. Its gaze pierces the stillness, a silent question hanging heavy in the humid air. Through this forced humidity, the visioned serpent, a creature made of pure, condensed steam, manifests in the corners of the room, acting as the stirring paddle that carries the seeker's voice up to the branches of the Waka Chan. The Pibna, the sweat bath, is the microvat. It is the transitional piece where the human body is treated like a vessel of corn paste, being re-steamed to align with the primordial humidity of the zenith. Inside the Pibna, the hinge is artificially loosened. Priests pour water over fire-heated stones, the stones of the first hearth, to create a humidity so thick it mimics the primordial miasma of the fourth creation. This isn't just steam. It is a concentrated form of the sip. In this air, the red tie of the seeker begins to leak through the pores of the skin, mixing with the humid its of the chamber. The pibna serves as the filter. Just as a master of fermentation removes the spent grain, the gray silt, from a batch, the seeker uses the sweat bath to purge the bitter sap of Xibalba from their system. They emerge from the stone womb, ripened, their skins slick with a renewed golden its, ready to stand at the center of the quincunx once more. In a world where heat is the primary engine of the tally, the pibna stands as the sacred, refining hearth. Here, the leaders of the living nine descend into the stone womb to reboil their spirits, purging the gray silt of mortality to ensure they do not stiffen into the heartless, wooden mannequins of the failed era. But a silent rot is leaking through the hinge. A parasitic cold from the 23rd level, the bitter sap of Xibalba, is siphoning the thermal energy from the great distillery, threatening to kill the yeast of human existence. The sips are chained through a process of triple binding, ensuring that the heat of the people doesn't leak into the cold void, and that the bitter sap of Xibalba cannot evaporate upward. The first link in the chain is the resin. The sips are chemically weighted by the microscopic particles of the Wakachan's sap. This creates a heavy humidity that clings to the walls of the living nine. Without this resinous weight, the sip would simply float away, leaving the vat, the world, exposed and dry. At each corner, an ancient Bakub, a skybearer, holds the ends of the mist. They are the ones who pull the chain tight. If a Bakub lets go, the sip unravels. The air becomes clear and sharp, the lost clarity. The humidity drops, and the divine wine inside the people begins to evaporate. This is the dry death that precedes the return of the wooden mannequins. When the sips transition into their protection state, they lose their soft, cloud-like appearance and take on the look of taut, iridescent tendrils. They do not just float, they tether. The sips appear as long, glowing filaments of gray-gold vapor. Up close, these filaments look like spun glass or pulled sugar, vibrating with the heat of the people below. They are not white like common clouds. They have the translucent sheen of a dragonfly wing, stained with the amber hue of fermented balshay. Because the sips are saturated with its sacred sap, the surface of the chained vat has an oily rainbow-like refraction. When a seeker looks up through the humid air, The sky shouldn't look blue. It should look like the surface of a deep, dark pond, shimmering with the pollutants of grace, the tobacco smoke and the resin vapor. If the lords of Xibalba try to reach up, they hit this mesh. To them, the chained sips feel like sticky, boiling webs. The humidity is so high that it drowns the cold spirits of the dead, pushing them back down into the roots. The sips are the skin of the batch, keeping the purity in and the bitter sap out. If you encounter one in the forest, hold your breath. If you inhale their inverted breath, your soul begins to leak into the underworld prematurely. If you encounter one in the forest, hold your breath. If you inhale their inverted breath, your soul begins to leak into the underworld prematurely. If you encounter one in the forest, hold your breath. If you inhale their inverted breath, your soul begins to leak into the underworld prematurely. You start to become a wayub while you're still walking. But if the red tie is what binds the individual, the sip, tobacco spirits, are what bind the very air we breathe. They are the clamps on the collective lungs of the world. These spirits don't just watch, they enforce the density of the dark. While your red tie keeps your soul from leaking out, the sip ensure that the outside doesn't get in. Yet this barrier is not self-sustaining. It is a living veil that must be fed by those who still draw breath. By actively blowing tobacco smoke into the earth, the living are actually replenishing the sip's miasma. When a practitioner blows smoke into a hole in the earth, they are not just making an offering, they are thickening the fog that protects the living from the raw, blinding vision of the zenith. This lost clarity in the zenith became a secret so sharp it had to be cauterized. To keep the zenith from consuming the mind, the living learned to thicken the air with a sacred shield. They discovered that the breath of the earth could be mirrored by the breath of the man. In Mayan thought, things that are too clear or too white, like the white bone or the blinding sun, are dangerous. The Maya used charcoal and smoke to blacken or seal sacred objects to keep their power from leaking out. A majestic Mayan pyramid pierces the sky, its ancient stones whispering tales of forgotten gods and long-lost rituals. High on the 23rd tier, a Mayan elder kneels, his weathered face etched with the stories of generations. With reverent hands, he packs a clay pipe with potent tobacco, preparing an offering to the spirits. He inhales deeply, releasing a plume of smoke that dances and fades, a silent prayer to the earth and sky. A lone Mayan hunter, marked with tribal symbols, moves silently through the sweltering jungle, bow in hand. The air hangs thick with humidity, alive with the calls of exotic birds and rustling leaves. He stealthily tracks a jaguar, his senses alert to every shadow and sound. Each step is measured, his focus absolute as he navigates the dense undergrowth. Unsuspecting, the hunter ventures into forbidden territory, unaware of the chilling presence that awaits him. A sudden, biting cold pierces the sweltering jungle heat, signaling a shift in the natural order. The vibrant jungle cacophony abruptly dies, leaving behind an unnerving silence that amplifies the hunter's growing dread. A prickling unease crawls across his skin, a primal warning that tightens his chest with mounting fear. Shimmering figures materialize from the periphery, their indistinct forms hinting at an unseen menace. Their presence suffocates the air, a silent promise of impending danger closing in on the vulnerable hunter. The sip close in, their eyes burning with an age-old hunger, a prelude to chilling doom. A spectral hand reaches out, casting a wave of icy energy that engulfs the hunter. He gasps, the frigid touch stealing his breath, his eyes wide with sudden terror. A strange, irresistible force pulls at him, draining his very essence. His vitality seeps away, leaving him weakened and vulnerable to the encroaching darkness. He collapses, his eyes vacant, his body now nothing more than an empty shell. Flickering torchlight dances across the walls of the artificial Xibalba, revealing Mayan priests deep in concentration. Priests meticulously chart the landscape of death on a vast, ancient stone tablet, their movements precise and deliberate. Glyphs and symbols come alive under the flickering light, each marking a piece of the puzzle before them. A priest points with reverence to a specific marking, a biological signature glowing faintly on the stone. "This is the tally of the flesh," the priest intones, his voice echoing in the subterranean complex. "We must understand their tormentors to fight back," he says, determination etched in his illuminated face. In the fading of the noticeable, the medicine man, H-men, would point to a bowl of balshe, sacred honey fermentation, that had been left in the sun until it turned to a dry, tasteless crust. As the liquid vanishes, the solids settle. In a healthy fermentation, these solids, the lees, are the foundation for the next batch. The jagged edges of the dried honey are the obsidian blades that remain when the life force is gone, becoming noticeably dry, easily shattered, and lacking the flex of the living nine. This tasteless crust is the most visceral way to show an apprentice what happens when the gray siphon wins. The sun, acting as a dry, hungry eye, pulls the moisture upward, just as Yom Kimil pulls the soul downward. If a medicine man saw a patient caught in the gray siphon, they wouldn't use herbs, they would use vibration. They would ring copper bells or beat a ton drum at a specific frequency to try and plug the leak. They were trying to create a counter pressure to stop the siphon from pulling the patient's soul down into the infinite darkness. In the underworld of Xibalba, names are not spoken. They are resonances. The bells are ringing your tally, asking the darkness if you are spent grain or a living batch. The gray siphon begins when the sip, the holy breath of the world, is no longer held by the backups. It is a tug from the roots. You will feel it first in your joints. They will become dry and clatter, like stalks of dead maize. This is the underworld, reaching up to suck the its out of your marrow. The rubied glow of the seeker's blood doesn't just wink out. It settles like dust. Then the warmth in the fingertips retreated toward the heart, leaving behind a noticeable numbness that smelled of old stone. The horizon didn't collapse. It simply ceased to be an anchor. Without the sip to hold the vision, the eye reached out for a border and found only the lees of space. It is a darkness that isn't made of black ink, but of spent time. The golden humidity, once a tight blanket over the world, began to fray. The chains of the mist snapped silently, and the sweet smell of fermented maize was replaced by the lost clarity, an air so thin and sharp it cut the lungs like obsidian glass. Here in the gray siphon I float, utterly disoriented, lost in the infinite darkness. A horrifying necklace of human eyes drifts into view, each strung together by nerve cords. Their gazes feel blank and overwhelming. I reach out, desperate, but my hands pass right through them, unable to grasp the ghastly vision. Yom Kimil has collected your vision. A voice rings. Ash covers the ground like a suffocating blanket, each step kicking up clouds of gray dust. I stumble forward, my lungs burning with each ragged breath, the air thick with despair. The oppressive atmosphere weighs heavily, a tangible manifestation of a world in decay. This is the era of Vukub Kakwish, a time of shadows and ruin, where hope struggles to survive. High in the desolate expanse, a giant macaw is perched on a skeletal tree, its presence both majestic and eerie. His teeth gleam like jewels, a stark contrast to his eyes, which are cold and metallic. The macaw's light is sickly and weak, barely piercing the oppressive atmosphere. With unsettling pride, Vukub Kakwish proclaims, "I proclaim myself the sun, the workshop of the gods." A symphony of divine frustration and the sharp scent of freshly cut wood fills the air. Gods, radiant and distinct, struggle with lifeless wooden figures, their divine frustration palpable. Failed human forms lay scattered, stiff joints betraying the god's celestial craft. Cosmic forge light dances across discarded tools, reflecting the divine effort gone awry. A god sighs, examining a flawed creation. They have no life sap, no memory. They cannot oil the hinge with prayer. The god laments, a cosmic puzzle unsolved. In the wood people village, figures move with eerie stillness, their faces blank, their eyes reflecting no light. Daily tasks are performed with a haunting hollowness, devoid of prayer or acknowledgement of the gods. The sky darkens ominously, a heavy gloom spreading like a suffocating blanket above the village. Suddenly, thick black resin begins to fall, splattering against wood and skin with a viscous darkness. The unfeeling wood people stand motionless as the strange rain continues to cascade around them. Resin rains down, each drop a burning curse upon the wood people, sealing their pores and stealing their breath. Screams echo as the wood people suffocate, a horrifying betrayal unfolding in their village. Grinding stones, once used for nourishment, rise, smashing faces with merciless force. Water jars pour resin into open mouths, choking the wood people from the inside. The tools cry out in vengeful unison. You burned us, now we burn you. The earth is sealed under black resin. The sun, a ghost, barely pierces the smoke. A suffocating void chokes the sky, a haunting twilight of ruin. A lone figure stumbles through the resin-covered ruins. The figure is a solitary silhouette against the desolate landscape, wandering the resin twilight, forever condemned. A creation gone awry, a haunting reminder of what was lost. In the deep, the tally of the flesh was managed by a rigid hierarchy of rot, for the 12 lords of death weren't just individuals, they were sickness, pairs. The first sickness pair's Shikrapot, known as the flying scab, represents surface-level trauma and breaches in the body. Zikiripat's actions allow external cold to penetrate, making the soul vulnerable. Kuchimakwik, the gathered blood, is the lord of coagulation, responsible for thickening the blood. Kuchumakwik transforms the blood from a flowing river into a stagnant swamp. Together, they disrupt the world tree's mechanism, leading to rigidity and overall vulnerability. Hunahpu, the pus demon, symbolizes internal infection and ruptures within the body. He causes bloating and foul breath by transforming the body's fluids into pressurized gas. Ahalgana, the jaundice demon, represents discoloration and the draining of healthy fluids. He replaces the body's natural color with a sickly pallor resembling dying maize. Chamiabak and Chamiaholum are entities that dismantle a person's essence. They strip the crocodile's spine of its meat, symbolizing the removal of vitality. This process reduces the individual to a mere skeleton, a shell of their former self. This prepares the individual for a state of complete consumption. They induce emaciation, making the traveler light and vulnerable. Their ultimate goal is to prepare the individual for total dismantling and obliteration. Ahalmes, the sweeping demon, spreads contamination by introducing the filth of Xibalba into living spaces. Ahalmes introduces invisible infections into food and water sources. Ahaltakab, the stabbing demon, induces acute failure through stabbing pains. These pains feel like flint knives under the ribs, weaponizing the body's infrastructure. Sheik, known as the Hawk, embodies vertical trauma. Sheik causes sudden and violent collapses from above. His attacks sever the connection between the head and the heart. Patan, known as the Burden, embodies static pressure. Patan crushes travelers with the journey's weight. Together, Sheik and Patan break down ego before entering Yum Kimil's presence. 1 death and 7 death do not cause sickness. They signify the end of life's count. They await the completion of other lords' work. Seated on thrones of bone, these lords viewed humans not as sacred beings, but as trash to be broken down. The hero twins didn't just kill them. They reorganized them, forcing them to only take those whose time had truly come. Long before the Satun Sat, families would place a broken pot outside their doorway every night, filled with a mixture of water and sour fermented maize. The pot had to be noticeably cracked. This was a siphon trap. The lords of Xibalba are attracted to the smell of souring. They would stop at the doorstep to audit the leaking jar, spending all night trying to siphon the spirit out of a vessel that was already empty. By sunrise, the Lord of Death would be tied to the jar, and the family inside would be safe. The naming veil, the silent tally. In the old world, people often had a silt name and a true name. They never spoke their true name near a cave, a cenote, or a dark corner. To the sickness pairs, a name is a label on the bottle. If they don't have the label, they can't tally the batch. By using silt names, names of stones, dirt, or ash, the Maya ensured that young Camille's Book of the Dead remained a collection of anonymous tallies. Before the law of the living lime, people would cover their entire bodies in cold wood, ash, and soot before sleep. The sickness pairs, like Hunahpu and Xbalanque, hunted by sensing the radiant heat of the red tie. Ash is a noticeable insulator. By coating themselves in spent carbon, the Maya made their vessels look like they were already finished batches. To a passing spirit snake, the person looked like a pile of cold dregs rather than a living ferment. These are the architectural and spiritual protocols kings would use to sanitize Palenque against the 12 sickness pairs. The law of the living lime. The workers burned limestone at high heat, imitating the House of Hot, to create a caustic white powder. They coated the temples in a noticeable layer of white stucco. This was the external seal. This white glaze was so bright, it blinded the sickness pairs. To a halpa, puss, the white walls looked like a sterile desert where no rot could take root. 2. The law of the copal screen resins were bled from the bark of the copal tree and distilled over slow coals. The smoke was then funneled through the temple doorways to create a vapor barrier. This resinous air acted as a sticky trap for the invisible spores of jaundice. It filtered the breath of the city before it could reach the king's lungs. 3. Gravity was harnessed to create a constant flow of mountain water through stone channels. These were the veins of the vessel, flushing the lees and waste out of the plaza. By keeping the water moving, kings denied the sickness pairs a stagnant hinge. Rot cannot grow in a current. It requires a static sip. 4. The mercury ore was ground into a fine, noticeable crimson dust. The synthetic red tie. This toxic red pigment was painted onto the threshold of tombs and sacred jars. To the bone scrapers, this cinnabar looked like poisoned blood. It cauterized their fingers upon contact, keeping the dead from being prematurely milled. 5. Volcanic glass was napped into razors so thin they could slice the shadow. These blades were embedded in the lintels to prune any sickness that tried to drift inside. If a sour audit tried to enter, the obsidian would bleed the infection before it could touch the living mash. 6. Hollowed logs were tuned to a specific frequency, the bell song of the surface. The constant rhythm acted as a sonic agitator, keeping the particles of the city in motion. Sickness thrives in silence. The drums created a noticeable vibration that shattered the delicate membranes of the sickness pair's spores. 7. Polished pyrite mirrors were used to concentrate the sun into the darkest corners. This brought the heat of Hunahpu into the damp hinges of the city. By eliminating the gloom, kings have removed the breeding ground from mold. The light sterilized the shadows. 8. Green stone was carved to represent the permanent husk. It was placed over the faces of the sick or the dead as a static shield. Jade does not rot. It provided a noticeable substitute for flesh, tricking the sickness pairs into attacking a stone batch while the spirit escaped. 9. Mineral salt was gathered from the coast, the dried tears of the ocean. A line of salt was drawn around the city's bunghole, the main entrance. Salt dehydrates the rot. It sucks the moisture out of the sickness pairs, leaving them as brittle chaff before they can cross the line. 10. May tobacco was powdered and blown into the four corners of the room. This acted as a spiritual insecticide, clearing the air of the small audits. The heat of the tobacco burned the throats of the lords of pus, making the air too noticeably spicy for them to breathe. 11. Clays were fired at extreme temperatures until they turned to glass stone. All storage jars for the sacred wash were glazed to prevent the siphon of the clay from drinking the spirit. This created an impenetrable wall between the malt and the underworld silt. 12. Ritual fasting and bitter sips were used to clean the internal vat. The people would purge their own red tie of any accumulated lees. By self-auditing their bodies, the people ensured they were always a fresh pitch. The sickness pairs found no old residue to feast upon. The result of the laws. With these 12 laws, kings turned Palenque into a golden laboratory. The city was noticeably different from the jungle around it. It was a place where the red tie could ferment in absolute purity. In Xibalba, the deceased undergoes a transformation process. This transformation involves a shift from a corpse to an ascending life force. This life force is visualized as sap flowing through the world tree. The transformation symbolizes the energy of the new world emerging. This emergence is fueled by the sacrifice of the old, akin to new life sprouting from death. The cosmic crocodile sacrifice stabilized the world and formed the land. The crocodile is depicted causing a flood, upsetting the jar. The gods intervene to stop the deluge. The intervention is visualized as cutting the crocodile's throat. The jar of the Dark Count symbolizes a period of transition rather than a definitive end. Its emptiness, with silt settled, represents a moment of silence and reflection. The sap rising through the crocodile's spine signifies renewal and the turning of a pivotal point. This imagery collectively indicates the stability of the sky, representing cosmic order and balance. Mayan beliefs include the concept of the world's end being signaled by inanimate objects revolting. This revolt symbolizes a disruption in the established cosmic order. Griddles and pots, typically passive tools, begin to exhibit signs of discontent. These objects, tired of being burned, start to speak, indicating an unnatural occurrence. The speaking objects also strike back, actively resisting their usual roles. This rebellion of inanimate objects serves as a harbinger of the world's impending doom, according to Mayan beliefs. The failure of the count triggers a shift in the mundane world. This shift causes the mundane world to become predatory. Kitchen tools begin to rebel as a result of this disruption. This rebellion is not a malfunction, but a symptom. Objects mirror the chaos of Xibalba, indicating a deeper infection. The Maya believed that every entity possesses a spirit shadow, also known as a way. This way is essentially a tether connecting the physical object to its spiritual essence. A critical juncture, referred to as the hinge, maintains the balance between the physical and spiritual realms. When the hinge malfunctions, the tether to these spirit shadows is severed. This disruption causes objects to become distorted, reflecting the chaotic nature of Xibalba, the Maya underworld. The tools of the living are replaced by the hardware of the dead, symbolizing this transition to the underworld. Mokochi, or Not Stomach, is an underworld entity. He is depicted as a skeletal figure with a distended belly. The bloated belly symbolizes the gases of decomposition. Mokochi enforces fasting on initiates, nodding the ego. Chapatwe is a creature in the underworld. He is depicted as a giant centipede. Chapatwe has a human head. His legs are formed like the fingers of the underworld. A king emerges from a bone portal through Chapatwe. The king is shown stepping out of Chapatwe's mouth. The Maxway, also known as the monkey, is portrayed as a rejected elder sibling of humanity. He derides humans as beings of maize flesh. Maxway hunts by stealthily entering rooms and using his fingers to attack. His method involves severing the connection between the soul and body by untying the red scarf's knot. The Sip are enforcers of the 9th level of the underworld, Xibalba. They are small, deer-like beings, composed of coiling tobacco smoke. The Sip's primary duty is to protect Yumkimil's fermentation vats. They exhale a blinding fog to disorient souls attempting to escape Xibalba prematurely. This fog forces the escaping souls back into the Satansat, the place of torment. Chibirias, referred to as the mouth of the earth, marks the initial entry point into the underworld. This space is characterized by high humidity, darkness, and a strong scent of damp soil. It symbolizes the soul's transition from the realm of light into darkness. The transition also involves a shift from breathing air to experiencing watery earth. Chibirias represents a fundamental change in sensory experience for the entering soul. Beziak, the realm of scorpions, represents the teeth of the ground. Scorpions symbolize the decomposition process after death. Their stings visually represent cellular breakdown. This breakdown signifies the body's return to its elemental components. The multitude of pinpricks from the stings illustrates this decomposition. Apanuiyayu is characterized by a torrent of blood. The blood symbolizes the unsealing of veins. This unsealing represents the loss of physical form. The level signifies the dissolution of individual identity. This dissolution occurs into a collective fluid. The collective fluid exists within Xibalba's great machine. Shushuayu represents a specific level of fermentation. This stage is characterized by a distinct odor reminiscent of decay. The stink of death signifies the ongoing decomposition process. The lords of pus and jaundice preside over this chemical breakdown. Their role involves transforming the body into compost. This process softens the maize flesh, preparing it for subsequent stages of decomposition. Lab, also known as the House of Gloom, represents a state of complete deprivation. In Lab, the soul loses its sense of sight and orientation. It also loses connection to the upward world, a realm of enlightenment. This domain, ruled by the Jarpora, is characterized by absolute silence. The crushing shadow of Lab serves to diminish and negate the ego. Tukur, known as the place of owls, is characterized by the sounds of nocturnal birds. Moan birds and owls are prominent among these nocturnal creatures. These birds serve as messengers in the spiritual realm. They carry news and communications between the 9th and 23rd levels of existence. Specifically, they relay messages from the dead to the living inhabitants of these levels. Sheet, also known as the place of knives, is characterized by its moving obsidian blades. These blades symbolize a process of spiritual refinement. The blades strip the soul of its attachments to its past life. This process ensures only the soul's seed passes through unharmed. Chamalkan is the penultimate level in the journey of the soul. In Chamalkan, all heat or life force is completely removed from the soul. The soul becomes cold, mirroring the surrounding stone. This absolute stillness is necessary before encountering the King of the Dead. Xibalba Bay, the 9th level, is the location where Yum Kimil sits on his throne of bone. This level is known as the Root Sky, signifying its fundamental importance. It is the place where the maze mash is finalized, representing a crucial stage in a process. The decision regarding energy recycling or loss is made at this level, determining its fate. An eternal pre-dawn mist swirls, a canvas of infinite potential, formless and deep. From the swirling void, geometric shapes begin to emerge, ethereal and divine. Itzamna, the architect, guides the cosmos, his hand shaping the very fabric of existence. He delicately drafts blueprints, lines of light forming in the nebulous expanse. The plan unfolds, a vision of heavens and earth pulled gently from the mist. Creation dawns as the architect's vision takes hold, a universe born from mist and design. Ixchel, the midwife, stands before the cosmic loom, the starlight reflecting in her focused eyes. Her hands dance with practiced grace, weaving strands of pure energy. The red ties. Electrical energy crackles around her, a symphony of cosmic power in motion. She connects the sky to the earth, ensuring a vital, unbroken circuit of pulsating energy. In the divine laboratory, Xbalanque, the grandmother, grinds maize, her movements precise and ancient. Unseen energies crackle around her as she mixes the maize with other elements to make the divine mash. A soft, ethereal glow fills the laboratory, illuminating bubbling alchemical equipment. She delicately stirs the concoction, her eyes reflecting both wisdom and determination. Xbalanque breathes life into the mixture, preparing to create the first humans. In the Hall of Ancients, Xbalanque, the old man, sits enthroned in stone, his face etched with the passage of eons. His ancient eyes, pools of ageless wisdom, observe the designers. His gaze, both knowing and patient. His hands, gnarled and wise, move with a practiced grace, each gesture carrying the weight of ages. Xbalanque performs the pre-dawn calculation, ensuring the viability of the new creation. The air hums with the power of creation as the old man weaves the fate of a new world. His focus is absolute, his purpose unwavering. As he safeguards the dawn of a new era, ancient Mayan city thrives, yet fear permeates the air under the wood people's rule. Days gave out ominous signs of loom as resin rains down, casting a pall over the vibrant city. Amidst the gloom, Hunahpu and Xbalanque play ball, their movements full of youthful exuberance. Their laughter rings out, a brief reprieve from the city's oppressive atmosphere. The brothers' joyful game momentarily overshadows the looming dread. Even in paradise, a game brings a sense of normality. While they were great ball players, the brothers were also masters of the patoli, a gambling board, and the dice. They didn't just play for fun, they were counting. Their games were a way of simulating the movement of the stars. The lords of Xibalba sent 4 military owls to the surface to deliver a formal invitation. These owls represented the leaking of the underworld into the upper realms. The arrow owl, named Chabi Tukur. This is the swift messenger. He represents the puncture wound and the suddenness of the summons. His wings are not soft feathers, but sharp, overlapping flint blades. He doesn't have a normal beak. His face terminates in a tapered spearhead. He is built for piercing the veil between the worlds. The one-legged owl, named Hunahpu Tukur. This owl represents the unevenness of the underworld and the limping tally. He is massive and bloated, with a heavy, ragged coat of wet feathers that look like rotten leaves. He has only one giant, powerful leg positioned dead center under his body. Hunahpu Tukur will often be seen carrying a large, curved obsidian claw used for hooking souls to drag them down. The macaw owl, named Kakix Tukur. This is the false light messenger. He represents the leftover vanity of the wood people era. He has the body of a predator owl, but the garish, neon-bright tail feathers of a macaw. He wears a mask of shimmering mica over his owl face, making him look like he is glowing from within, though it is just a reflection of the false light. The skull owl named Holum Tukur. This is the most terrifying of the four. He represents the white bone and the finality of the processing. He has no feathers at all on his head or torso, just bare, bleached bone. His wings are made of tattered, leathery skin, like a bat's, stretched over skeletal finger bones. He carries his own severed owl head in his talons, using the empty eye sockets as a periscope to see into the sip, the mist. When the skull owl representing the lords of Xibalba offered this game to Hunahpu and Xbalanque, they were flattered by the challenge. The owls told them, "The lords heard the thunder under your feet. We wish to play against you. They admire your skill." The summons did not come as a threat, but as a seductive call to glory. Standing before the brothers, the skull owl, the hollow-faced enforcer of the white bone, spoke with a voice that rattled like dry seeds in a gourd. He offered a game of status to Hunahpu and Xbalanque, a challenge that bridged the gap between the living nine and the deep dark. "The lords of death have heard the thunder of your feet," the owl hissed. "They admire your skill. They envy the heat of your play. They wish to test their own ancient strength against your youth. Go now, bring your pads, your tiger skin helmets, and your heavy rubber ball. The court is waiting." The brothers were deeply flattered by the challenge. In their lost clarity, they saw only a contest of skill, unaware that the skull owl was not inviting them to a match, but to a processing. By bringing their own gear, they were voluntarily delivering the vessels of their own destruction to the door of Xibalba. When the brothers left for Xibalba, they took their leather pads, their helmets, and their rubber balls. But they left their spirit wisdom behind. They didn't prepare for the houses of trial. After arriving in Xibalba, the lords of death, 1 death and 7 death, gave the brothers cigars and torches. They were commanded to keep them burning all night, but return them exactly as they were in the morning. The brothers, being literal-minded and lacking divine cunning, smoked the cigars and burned the torches to stay warm in the dark. When the sun rose and the cigars were ash, the lords of Xibalba declared them tallyless. They had failed the test of preservation, that ritual sacrifice. Because they failed the trial, they were taken to the sacrificial altar. They were decapitated, and their hearts were cut out. This was not just a killing, it was a harvest. The lords of Xibalba believed they were extracting the final essence of these wooden people. Their bodies were buried at the Pupulcha, the place of ball game sacrifice. The severed head and the gourd tree involves the head of Hunahpu. The lords of Xibalba took his head and placed it in the fork of a tree that had never borne fruit. Immediately, the tree covered itself in round gourds, and the head of Hunahpu became indistinguishable from the fruit. This tree became the Crescentia Cujete, otherwise known as the calabash tree. The lords forbade anyone from touching the tree, fearing the power of the living remains of the maize god. The death of Hunahpu was not the end. While his body was macerated in the earth of Xibalba, his head remained active. When the daughter of a Xibalban lord, Blood Moon named Ixquick, approached the tree, the head spat into her hand. This spittle was the concentrated its sacred sap. It carried the DNA of the maize people and the wisdom of the heavens. This act bypassed the tally of the flesh, allowing the brothers to be reborn through the hero twins, who would eventually return to the ball game to avenge them. Just as there are 9 levels, Xbalanque, of Xibalba, the underworld, reaching downward, there are 13 levels of the heavens, Xbalanque, reaching upward. From Xbalanque, heavens, These are the 13 gods of the upper world, who manage the unseen forces of the day. They control time, rainfall, and wind. Each level corresponds to a different load that the day carries. To the Maya, time was a physical weight, and these 13 gods took turns carrying the burden of the hours across the sky. Xbalanque are frequently treated as a singular, collective force of sacred time. However, through the Xibalba and various codices, we can identify the specific archetypes and entities that govern these levels. The primordial levels of Hunahpu are levels 1 through 4 are a part of a breath cycle. These levels are associated with the early growth of your living nine, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, the supreme creator and the lord of the skies. He is often seen as the source of the Its, sacred sap that flows through the world tree. Ixchel, the moon goddess, oversees the lower heavens. She is the weaver of life, mirroring the way Kima weaves the death fibers. The Bakabs, the four-directional gods who hold up the corners of the sky so it does not collapse back into the underworld. The celestial elements of Hunahpu in the levels of 5 and 9. These gods govern the atmospheric forces that the soul encounters as it climbs past the level of the fruit. Chak, the rain god, the god who strikes the clouds with his lightning axe. He provides the water for the level of the sap. Kinich Ahau, the sun god, the face of the day. He is the ultimate goal of the hero twins, the light that burns away the inverted breath. Cox, the god of the wild vegetation and maize. He is the patron of the level of the fruit. The lords of the zenith, levels 10, 13. These are the most abstract and powerful levels, reaching the summit where the sunbird sits. The star gods, Sitchak Ko. These deities represent the planet Venus and the constellations. Lakakal, a god associated with the completion of cycles. The Supreme 13. At the 13th level sits the heart of heaven, Cooks Kaj, often identified as Huracan, the one-legged, the god of the great wind and the final architect of the universe. Lords of the zenith, the gods of the 10th through 13th levels of heaven, introduce themselves as the architects of the permanent. If the lords of Xibalba introduce themselves through Ahal, the making of markings, sickness, the lords of the zenith introduce themselves through Tsek, the foundation, bone, and Cooks, the heart. They represent the transition from the biological world to the mathematical and celestial world. As the 13th floor ceiling comes closer, the arrival of levels 10 and 11. At this height, the soul is no longer a man. The lords here introduce themselves as the measured distance. They are often associated with the Pleiades and the pole star. They introduce the concept that the universe is not just a jungle, but a grid. While the Sip have inverted breath, fog, these lords introduce solid light. The introduction of the white bone at level 12. As the soul reaches the penultimate level, the lords introduce themselves as the cleaners. This is the level of Lahun Chan, the great star. They strip away the last of the divine wine, the liquid essence, and leave only the white bone, the indestructible part of the soul that never rots. They introduce themselves not through smell or touch, but through high-frequency sound, the whistling of the solar wind at the top of the world tree. The heart of heaven at level 13 is the absolute summit that is governed by the trinity of Huracan, the heart of heaven, the heart of earth, and the heart of sky. He introduces himself as the single foot, the axis. Everything in the underworld and the lower living levels revolves around his foot. He is the hinge of the entire universe. While Kimil has the percentage hinge on his cheek to mark the end of life, Huracan is the axis hinge that allows the sun and moon to rotate. The three thunderbolts, the Huracan aspect. Before Huracan was seen as one god, he was a triple force of energy that powered the transition between levels. 1. Kakula Huracan, the one-legged lightning, the strike. 2. Chippy, Kakula, the spark. 3. Raksa, Kakula, the sustained flash. They provided the electrical pressure required to keep the 9th level from collapsing into the 13th. They were the power plant of the pre-Twilight world, bridging in that, if these were the gods in the natural environment, as brings about in Popol Vuh and the creators of the mud, wood, and corn, out in the midst of this folklore sit gods who actually sat in the twilight and tried to build these human prototypes. First to fail was Tepeyu, the sovereign, the kingly force of order. Tepeyu is the architect of the jar who kept picking the wrong material. He built beautiful mud vessels, but they all leaked or were too brittle to survive the fermentation of life. Gukumats, otherwise known as the feathered serpent, the force of movement and wind, is the helping hand with Tepuyu's mudman. That the problem that it was soft, it couldn't walk or multiply. Most importantly, it was limp and mindless. It crumbled in the water, the very element Gukumats lived in. Tepeyu and Gukumats watched it dissolve and realized that Earth alone lacked the structural integrity for a soul. To Huracan, the wooden people were a mechanical failure. They could walk and talk, but because they were made of wood, they were rigid and hollow. They had no blood to let, and no sweat to offer. Since Huracan cannot make wine from dry wood, because they couldn't bleed or pray, they couldn't participate in the cycle of the tally. They were like a jar that was empty. There was nothing for Yum Kimyo to ferment, and therefore nothing for the living 9 to grow. These three worked in unison to create the sun callers. Huracan provided the heat, Tepeyu provided the vessel, and Gukumats provided the water. But in the first 3 batches, the ingredients, mud and wood, refused to ferment. They stayed flat. When Gukumats finally discovers the yellow and white corn at Paxil, his new discovery had led to the successful 4th creation of the maize people. It wasn't until they found the corn, the grain that must rot to live, that the tally of the flesh finally began to work. While Huracan provided the thought of the new human, Gukumats and Tepeyu were the ones who took the corn and processed it. This is where the theme of divine wine and fermentation peaks. The grandmother goddess, Xbalanque, the midwife of the world, took the yellow and white corn and ground it 9 times. Pressure builds. As Xbalanque was the one who remembered to gather the resin of the flood to see why it failed. To Xbalanque, the resin was the anti-wine. While wine is the spirit of the rot, resin is the death of change. As Xbalanque took the divine mash from those 9 grindings and mixed it with water, this produced 9 precious liquids, the its of life. These 9 drinks became the internal fluids of the human body: the blood, the sweat, the fat, and the marrow. The 9 drinks correspond to the 9 levels of Xibalba. By drinking these, the first humans were born pre-fermented. They contained the essence of the underworld within their living veins, which is why they were finally able to pay the tally that the wooden people could not. The, its, or essence. She mixed the cornmeal with the water she used to rinse her hands. This corn water became the fat and the blood of the first 4 true men. Unlike the dry wood, this corn flesh was moist, fertile, and most importantly, it gave the humans intelligence. They could finally see the 13 levels of heaven and the 9 levels of the underworld. Without this creation of the maize people, the operation, all 22 levels would be unattended, and these gods realized a machine with no one to watching over it was useless. They eventually called them sun callers, creatures who would look at the 13th level and say, "Thank you," and look at the 9th level and say, "I remember." Because Xbalanque ground the corn so finely, 9 times once for each level of the dark, the resulting humans were too perfect. The first 4 men from the corn, Jaguar Quitsi, Jaguar Knight, Mahukuta, and True Jaguar, could see everything. They saw the 13 levels of the zenith and the 9 levels of the deep at once. They understood the Hinge perfectly. The 3 gods, Huracan, Tepu, and Gukumats, convened in the obsidian halls of Xibalba, their voices echoing with a newfound anxiety. "They are too perceptive," Huracan rumbled, his voice a low growl of thunder. "Their gaze pierces the veil. They see too much." Tepu, the feathered serpent, hissed in agreement, his scales shimmering in the dim light. "If they grasp the totality of the tally, the grand design, they will no longer hold us in awe. They will question. They will rebel." Gukumats, the Stormbringer, clenched his fists, the wind swirling around him. "We must diminish their sight, cloud their minds. They must not see the end." Huracan rose, his form crackling with celestial energy. He summoned a swirling vortex of mist, a dense, opaque cloud that pulsed with an unnatural chill. "This mist," he declared, his voice resonating with divine power, "will be their sip, their inverted breath. It will limit their vision, confine their perception to the immediate, the tangible." He unleashed the mist, and it surged forth, engulfing the world of mortals. The eyes of humans, once clear and far-seeing, clouded over, their vision blurred, their understanding fragmented. The gods watched as humanity stumbled, their path obscured, their memories fading. But within the hearts of men, a spark remained, a yearning for the lost clarity, a desire to ascend. And so began the long climb through the living 9 levels, a desperate quest to pierce the veil of the sip, to reclaim the vision that was stolen, to see the end of the tally once more. But this path was not a chaotic wilderness. It was a charted map, laid down in the dark of the first dawn. Before the sun's fire defined the living 9, a silent navigator traced the currents between the stars and the silt, weaving the architecture of the climb. The sovereign-plumed serpent, Kukulkan. Before the Maze era, Kukulkan was a sky-ocean deity. He was the only god who could move between the 13 and the 9 without a red tie. He acted as the surveyor. He lived in the water of the 23rd level's original state and was responsible for the greenery of the world. Though without the sun, his plants were pale and translucent. But as the waters receded and the architecture of the cosmos hardened into form, the surveyor coiled himself around the spine of the world. He shed his liquid skin to become the master of the shadow and the hour, anchoring his celestial path into the very limestone of the earth. Under perpetual twilight, gaunt maze people wander a desolate world, their eyes vacant and lost in a dream. A towering tree, its branches like skeletal fingers, claws at the dim sky dominating the horizon. Perched atop the highest branch sits 7 Maka, a bird of false glory, feathers shimmering with jewels. The jeweled feathers catch the faint light, creating a mesmerizing yet deceptive radiance around him. "I am the sun. Bask in my glorious light," 7 Macaw declares, his voice echoing through the twilight world. Flickering torchlight casts long shadows in the hero twins' hideout, illuminating maps spread across a rough-hewn table. Hunahpu and Xbalanque, their faces etched with determination, pore over the ancient charts. A grim silence hangs heavy as they speak of 7 Macaw, his vanity a barrier to the true sun. Their eyes meet, a spark of shared resolve igniting in the dimness. A plan begins to form, a silent promise to challenge the vain god. The torchlight dances, mirroring the twins' burning intent to restore balance. Hunahpu raises his blowgun, a determined glint in his eyes, against the backdrop of the ancient seven macaws tree. With deadly precision, the dart finds its mark, striking seven macaw, poised high in his perch. His turquoise teeth shatter in a brilliant explosion of color as the arrogant bird plummets from the tree. A shriek of pure agony and wounded pride pierces the air, marking the fall of the once mighty Seven Macaw. In Seven Macaw's lair, the hero twins stand before him, offering gleaming white corn kernels on a tray. Hunahpu, great Seven Macaw, we have the remedy to restore your teeth to even greater glory. Xbalanque, a new, stronger substance, far superior to jewels. Seven macaw. Stronger than jewels, you say? Proceed. The twins replace the jewels with corn. Seven macaw admires his reflection. Magnificent, more dazzling than before. Seven macaw, adorned with corn, slowly fades, his false light sputtering like a dying ember. A wave of shame washes over him as the first hint of true dawn breaches the horizon. The encroaching light relentlessly banishes the last shadows of his twilight domain. His reign of illusion ends, consumed by the stark reality of the rising sun. The Mayan city sleeps under a blanket of absolute darkness, a silence so deep it vibrates with anticipation. Every flame has been extinguished, plunging the once vibrant city into an eerie, unsettling void. Scattered pottery lies shattered upon the ground, remnants of a cycle nearing its terrifying end. The air is thick with unspoken dread, the Maya poised on the brink of the new fire ceremony. Awaiting the rebirth, they face the symbolic death of all that was, a sacrifice to the turning of time. In the profound darkness, the city holds its breath, awaiting the spark that will ignite a new beginning. In the silent temple, Xbalanque casts sight seeds, their rustling the only sound. He seeks the resonance of the hinge, a harmony in the temple's deep stillness. Darkness shrouds the temple, save for the seed's faint, ethereal glow. Xbalanque listens intently, hoping to ensure the cycle continues. Beneath a relentless sun, Xbalanque stands on the ancient stone platform, his face a map of time and knowledge. The desolate landscape stretches into infinity, a silent witness to the ritual. With a deliberate hand, he scatters seeds across the weathered stone. The dry rattle of seeds breaks the stillness, a fragile sound in the face of vast desolation. In the chamber's dim light, Xbalanque's gnarled hand delicately brushes spent grain, turning it into dust. Intricate carvings adorn the walls, each depicting the failures of past creation attempts. The echoing bell song fades, leaving behind an unsettling silence that hangs heavy in the air. Xbalanque leans over the ancient stone, his aged face etched with determination. His breath forms a fleeting mist, the sip of inquiry, a desperate plea for answers. The sacred chamber holds its breath, awaiting a sign amidst the dust and shadows. Inside the sacred chamber, a polished bone traces lines between seeds, an eerie tableau of fate and ritual. Light glints off the red tie, a stark contrast to the ancient setting, hinting at power and purpose. Seeds falling on their backs are swept aside, marked as emblems of the wooden mannequins. Upright seeds pulse with energy from the red tie, a silent blessing in the heart of the chamber. In the sacred chamber, Xbalanque turns to Xmucane, the divine grandmother, her serene face untouched by time. He presents the ratio, precise measurements for white maize and yellow maize. The chamber fills with an ethereal light, a celestial glow embracing the ancient space. Their focus shifts to the brewing vessel, prepared for a ritual of profound importance. Anticipation hangs heavy as the air crackles with ancient energy, the destiny of maize in the balance. In the sacred chamber, Xbalanque's voice rumbles, shaking stone and soul. The air crackles with unseen power. It is time. Xbalanque booms, his words echoing through the ancient chamber. His voice rises, filled with dark purpose. The wood failed, the mud dissolved. A brewing vessel bubbles ominously, promising creation born of sacrifice. Now, we must brew the flesh of the people from the grain itself, Xbalanque proclaims, sealing their fate. Before Xbalanque dropped the seeds and carved the vents, the world was a boundless vat without a lid. This was the time before the quincunx is described as the age of the uncontained. It was a period of infinite effervescence, where the universe had no bottom, no corners, and no tally. This was the time of the wild batch. The age of the uncontained ended because the wild batch began to turn to vinegar. Without a tally, the energy had no direction. It began to eat itself. The heat became a burn. When Xbalanque saw that the universe was boiling over, he realized that for the fermentation to have meaning, it needed boundaries. He took his staff and struck the liquid stone. Where he struck, the four corners appeared the first vents to let the excess pressure out. Then, he stepped into the center and created the fifth point, the plug, to give the universe a weight. The floor had a brutal map of the end. Four screaming vents at the corners acted as the leech holes, pulling the golden humidity out of the air until it snapped. The sacrifice will see the silt of his own history being dragged through the floor veins toward the center. And there, at the fifth point, the plug of the world, stood the lumberjack. Xibalba was the anchor of the quincunx, the heavy, calcified weight that kept the vat from ever being truly empty. If the sacrifice can stand on one of the corner vents and reverse the flow using their own red tie, they can break the quincunx. They can turn the drain into a geyser. The quincunx was the strainer that gave us a world we could stand upon, but it was also the trap that gave Xibalba a place to wait. As the wild batch began to cool and the silt, matter, began to form, the universe became too heavy to just pulse. It started to sag, to stop the world from collapsing into a dead mash. Xbalanque reached into the center of the vortex and froze the motion. Xbalanque had grabbed the fluid pulse and stretched it until it snapped into a vertical axis. This act created the world tree, the hinge, and the quincunx, the floor. Suddenly, the elasticity was gone, replaced by leverage. The world could now swing between life and death, but it was now noticeably trapped in the cycle of the tally. The Maya represented the hinge visually using a symbol called the quincunx, 4 dots at the corners and 1 in the center. This is the hinge itself, the axis mundi. It is the point where the world doesn't move, even as everything else spins around it. Maya kings would often build their thrones or ritual platforms at the exact center of a plaza to represent themselves as the living hinge. By standing there, the king was the only thing holding the sky and the underworld apart. When the king drills the new fire into the captive's chest, he is pitching the new yeast. He is introducing the heat that restarts the chemical reaction of time. If the ritual sacrifices weren't performed, the hinge might snap, causing the sun to stay in Xibalba forever. This new fire ceremony was performed to oil the hinge of the new year, ensuring the cycle of seasons would continue. Before the new fire could be lit, every single flame in the kingdom, from the grandest temple fire to the smallest kitchen hearth, had to be extinguished. The world was plunged into a terrifying, absolute darkness. Families would throw away their clay idols, break their pottery, and sweep their houses. Pregnant women were masked with Maggie leaves and locked in granaries. Children were kept awake and forced to march. It was feared that if the woman is masked with Maggie leaves because she is no longer considered human during the darkness, she is a vessel of potential that has gone sour. If the new fire isn't lit, she doesn't give birth to a child, she gives birth to a tsitsimitl, a star demon. Without the hinge active, the world is literally turning to vinegar. If a soul isn't careful, the star demons will spoil their spirit during this window. Children would turn into mice. If a marching child fell asleep, it was feared their soul would wander off the charted map and get lost in the Xibalba before the new fire could call them back. It was believed that if the fire failed, the star demons would devour the maize people, turning the corn flesh back into the mud prototype. When the new fire has drilled into the chest of a sacrificed captive at the summit of a mountain, this symbolized the heat returning to the vat. The first spark was the yeast that would reactivate the fermentation of time for the next 52 years. Failure is significantly dreadful. The first stage of the collapse is the softening of the skeleton. In fermentation, this fermentation process, this is the liquefaction. Just as the mud people could not hold their heads up, the maize people lose their hinge, the spine. They become fluid, their bodies melting into the maceration jars of Xibalba. They are no longer individual tallies. They are just a collective gray silt. In the process of making balché, sacred honey wine, if water gets into the mix prematurely, the honey won't ferment. It just becomes a cloudy, grayish mess. The gray silt is water-logged spirit. It is too heavy to rise to the zenith, and too thin to be claimed by the lords of Xibalba. It is the ultimate limbo, a state of being untallyable. The Ma'am are significant deities in Maya traditions. They are particularly important among the Tsutujil and Highland Maya. These deities are considered ancient spirits. They are often referred to as grandfathers within the community. The Ma'am hold the responsibility of carrying the year in Maya tradition. The Maya civilization perceived time not as an abstract concept, but as a tangible entity. They envisioned time as a physical burden that needed to be carried. The Ma'am, a divine porter, was responsible for carrying the year bundle. This bundle was secured to the Ma'am's back with a tumpline, a strap across his forehead, symbolizing the weight of time. The hinge signifies the threshold marking the end of the old year in the Ma'am tradition. This threshold represents a pivotal point of transition. The Ma'am, a key figure, arrives at this symbolic juncture. The Ma'am relinquishes the responsibilities and burdens of the past year. This transfer symbolizes the closure of an old cycle and the beginning of a new one. The next Ma'am receives the transferred burden, initiating the new annual cycle. The concept of year-bearers involves a cyclical rotation. This rotation ensures the continuous progression of time. The year-bearers operate in succession. This succession is crucial for maintaining the world's cycles. Without this rotation, the cycles would cease. Therefore, year-bearers are essential for temporal continuity. Maximon is a deity in modern Highland Maya tradition. He is particularly prominent in Santiago Atitlan. Maximon is identified as a Ma'am, a significant ancestral figure. He embodies a complex hinge figure. This hinge position signifies his role between old and new ways. Maximon represents a connection between tradition and modernity within the Maya culture. If Tepeu and Gukumats, Kukulkan, were the engineers, Xbalanque was the master of the tally. He is the originator of the Tzolk'in, the 260-day calendar. He didn't just help create humans, he cast the lots to see if the humans would be viable. Xbalanque is often depicted holding the site, coral tree, seeds used for divination. He represents the primordial intellect. To the Maya, he is the matchmaker of the universe, the one who ensures that the 13 numbers and the 20 signs align perfectly. If the hinge of the year turns smoothly today, it is because Xbalanque set the original tension of the springs. Kukulkan serves as an astronomical marker for seasonal changes. The symbolic descent of Kukulkan is timed to coincide with key agricultural periods. This alignment highlights the connection between astronomy and agriculture. Kukulkan's descent acts as a hinge, pivoting between different agricultural phases. The phenomenon marks important times for planting and harvesting. This astronomical event is culturally significant. During the spring and fall equinoxes, a unique phenomenon occurs at El Castillo in Chichen Itza. The serpent god, Kukulkan, appears to descend the staircase of the pyramid. This is not a physical descent, but an illusion created by light and shadow. The sunlight interacts with the pyramid structure to form the image of a serpent. This visual effect symbolizes the feathered serpent's descent to earth. The Kankunk's pattern features 4 corner posts. A central hearth is also a key element of the quincunx. This pattern was commonly used by commoners. It was not exclusive to kings or royalty. The quincunx was applied in cornfield layouts. It was also used in house construction. The Maya calendar incorporates 20 distinct day signs. Each day sign functions as a unique identifier within the calendar system. These day signs can be conceptualized as teeth on a gear. Each day sign possesses specific qualities and influences. These qualities are associated with a particular day it represents. The hero twins overcame challenges using intellect rather than physical power. Their key strategy involved applying mathematical principles. Math allowed them to pinpoint critical moments of vulnerability. Specifically, they calculated the precise timing related to a hinge. This hinge was identified as a weak point that could be exploited. By calculating the timing, they successfully navigated a dangerous situation. The twins devised a plan to identify the true lords of Xibalba. They sent a mosquito to bite each of the lords. The real lords cried out each other's names in pain when bitten, revealing their identities. The twins then greeted the lords by their secret names, confirming and binding them. The twins faced a challenge in the House of Gloom. The challenge required them to keep their cigars lit throughout the night. They were not allowed to consume the cigars. Failure to keep the cigars lit would result in sacrifice. Biological mimicry involves imitating natural elements for deception or advantage. The twins utilized fireflies on their cigars to mimic burning embers. This mimicry was intended to deceive the lords of Xibalba. The fireflies created a false impression, aiding the twins in their strategy. The twins conveyed knowledge to humanity through the Song of the Firefly. This song instructed the human soul. The song taught the human soul how to deceive the Sip. The Sip represents the oppressive force of the underworld. Thus, the song provided a means of overcoming the underworld's suffocating pressure. The cool fire is a concept related to the soul of the twins. It allows the soul to remain as nectar, preventing it from burning. This process preserves ancestral memory within the soul. Maintaining moisture and viability facilitates eventual upward movement of the soul. Tale of Children of Seven Macaw. Here, Zapakna, a giant weakened by hunger, trudges heavily, his gaunt frame casting a shadow on the sand. His massive form is a stark contrast to the vibrant, cheerful beach. The hero twins approach Zapakna, their faces masked with feigned concern. A deceptive brightness fills the scene as Zapakna's weariness pervades the otherwise joyful beach. Deceived, Zapakna crawls on his back toward a dark, narrow cave entrance. The tight space of the cave entrance amplifies Zapakna's vulnerability. Dim light casts long shadows, enhancing the sense of claustrophobia. He inches further inside, the rock pressing against him from all sides. The darkness seems to swallow him whole, a silent stone maw. Unaware, Zapakna continues his descent, deeper into the trap. Zapakna, breathing raggedly, his eyes wild with desperate hope, reaches the cave's floor, ready to seize his prize. He lunges, massive hands outstretched, targeting what he believes is the crab, unaware of the impending doom. The ground begins to tremble, a prelude to the twins' deadly plan. As the cave's supports give way, a deafening roar marks the collapse, as tons of rock bury Zapakna, the echo of destruction sealing his fate. At the world's edge, Xbalanque kicks mountains, each blow triggering devastating earthquakes across the barren land. The landscape is desolate, a stark monument to Xbalanque's destructive might. As the air crackles with impending doom, the hero twins advance, their faces masks of carefully feigned awe and admiration. Dust and debris fill the air as the ground continues to tremble under Xbalanque's relentless assault. Their calculated approach hints at a deception, a calm before the storm of an impending confrontation. Deep in the forest, the hero twins guide Xbalanque eastward, blowguns in hand, the vibrant green canopy filtering the sunlight. With practiced ease, they hunt birds, their movements swift and silent amidst the dense foliage. The rich aroma of roasting meat drifts through the air, an irresistible lure tightening Xbalanque's resolve. The vibrant forest teems with life, a stark contrast to the desolate lands left behind. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow, heightens the tension as Xbalanque's hunger grows. At the mountain base, the twins present a bird coated in white earth. Xbalanque greedily seizes the offering, unaware of the poison. He devours it, a fatal feast under the open sky. The monolithic mountain looms, a silent witness. Its peak challenges the sky, mirroring Xbalanque's impending fate. Unaware, Xbalanque consumes his doom against the backdrop of the eternal mountain. On the mountainside, Xbalanque raises a foot to stomp, but his stiff joints betray him, his power faltering. Lime calcifies his muscles, turning his once mighty limbs into unyielding stone. He strains, his face a mask of frustration as he struggles against his own body, immense power trapped within. Xbalanque's futile efforts echo across the silent peaks, a giant rendered helpless by time and trickery. The hero twins bind Xbalanque, his strength now useless against their cunning. They dig a pit, preparing Xbalanque's final resting place deep within the earth. Helpless, Xbalanque is buried as the setting sun casts long, ominous shadows. Orange and purple hues paint the sky, a silent witness to Xbalanque's impending doom. Sunlight drenches the cornfield, painting the towering stalks in a warm, golden hue. A weathered farmer stands strong amidst the rustling corn, a guardian of the golden sea. He begins the ancient ritual of nixtamalization, transforming raw corn into nourishing life. The air is thick with the earthy scent of corn, mingling with a faint, sharp aroma of lime. The scene is a vibrant tableau of transformation, a symbol of Earth's bounty and life's renewal. A celestial pyramid pierces the sky, its steps rising towards the heavens. Each level mirrors the ethereal realms of spiritual ascent. The pyramid stands as a timeless monument to the pursuit of enlightenment. Sunlight climbs the pyramid's face, each ray a step towards divinity. Shadows dance with light, revealing the pyramid's ancient secrets. The air shimmers with celestial energy, a beacon for seekers of truth. In a cavernous space, a lone soul drifts, surrounded by an oppressive darkness. The air grows thick with foreboding, a sense of utter vulnerability. Here is wife of Seven Macaw, named Shimomat. She looms as an imposing figure of immense power and ancient wisdom. She stands as the ultimate guardian, blocking the narrow passage ahead, the last defense against the dissolution of the material self. At the point of death, a soul sheds its protective shield, a final act of release. The soul's burden lightens as the shield dissolves, paving the way for its ascent. Losing its weight, the soul begins to rise, drawn upwards by an unseen force. Subtle shifts in light herald an alchemical pivot, a transformation in progress. The soul ascends, lighter than air, towards an ethereal, beckoning light. A gentle ascension begins, leaving behind the earthly bonds of identity. An ancestor spirit ascends towards the radiant fruit of the celestial tree, bathed in a soft, ethereal light. The spirit drifts gently, drawn towards the divine sustenance, a beacon in the vast expanse of the upper heavens. It merges seamlessly with the sweet nectar, becoming one with the source of divine life and power. Serenity washes over the scene, a testament to the soul's spiritual completion and ascension. The upper heavens glow with renewed light, celebrating the spirit's arrival and eternal peace. When they spoke to the fathers, they were messengers. When they speak to the twins, they are harbingers. They recognize the twins' heat. They smell the malt of the fathers in the son's blood, and it makes their soot vapor pulse with a noticeable neon green light. They were the same four shadows that had pulled the fathers into the drain, the same soot fumes that had choked the air years before. But as they landed in the silence left by Capricorn, they looked noticeably heavier. The owls lean in to audit the twins, expecting the scent of fear, which is a sour, vinegary ferment. The soot feathers of the owls begin to crackle and curl, like paper held too close to a hearth, and their eyes didn't reflect the sun. They swallowed it. The twins aren't just playing a game. They are trying to reboil the history that the owls have already carried down into the silt. The owls stop their soft, rhythmic hooting. Instead, they emit a metal-on-stone screech. This is the sound of the underworld tuning itself to a higher pressure. Their eyes, which were dull like ash, suddenly flare with a sickly neon blue. They are overclocking their connection to the gray siphon just to stay grounded in the twins' presence. They didn't just bring a message. They brought the scent of the first failure, a cold, fermented musk that warned the twins that the underworld was waiting to finish the meal it had started a generation ago. The owls didn't speak with tongues. They spoke with the pressure of the void. When they tried to wrap their soot, wings around the twins' shadows, but the shadows wouldn't budge. The air hissed. The twins' red tie was so hot it began to char the siphon as it arrived. I saw the lead owl, Chabi Tukur, recoil, its beak dripping a black, oily bile. It realized right then, these weren't just more seeds for the silo. This was a counter ferment. The suns had brought a fire that could melt the copper bells of the 10th level. The twins don't argue with the owls. They do something far more dangerous to an Asian. They just smile. A smile is a lid on the vat. This traps the heat inside, refusing to let the siphon leak their power away through fear. They look at the owls not as messengers of gods, but as spent steam. As the owls retreat, fluttering like burnt rags, they lead the twins toward the hinge, but they do not take the wide road. They lead them across the bridge of spikes, the first mechanical audit of the descent. The bridge of spikes is composed of millions of upright bone splinters and obsidian thorns, all vibrating at the frequency of the bell song. To fermentation, these spikes are degassing pins. Their only purpose is to find a soft spot in the brother's skin to cause a leak in the vessel. If a spike pricks the skin, the red tide doesn't just drip like blood. It evaporates instantly into a golden mist. Once that mist escapes, the siphon catches it. The seeker becomes noticeably lighter, colder, and more disoriented. This is how the underworld pre-thins a soul before it even reaches the quincunx. The spikes didn't find a leak. They found a perfect seal. The twins weren't walking, they were pressing. With every step, they ground the obsidian thorns into gray silt, leaving a trail of broken glass behind them. They weren't being strained, they were breaking the strainer. Having crossed the bridge without losing a single sip of their power, the twins arrive at the House of Gloom. This is where the foxfire is strongest, a place where the light of the sun is a distant memory, and the only thing that glows is rot. When the twins enter the house off in the gloom, they don't just lose their sight, they lose their perspective from the spent vapors. The gloom acts like a thick syrup. It presses against the twins' skin, trying to equalize the pressure. In the outside world, the red tie pushes out. Here, the gloom tries to push in. The lords give the twins a cigar and a torch, telling them they must keep them lit all night, but with tricks the twins return them whole in the morning. This causes the twins to proceed to the next level, the House of the Cold. If the House of Gloom was about dampening the spirit, this house is about crystallizing the batch. In the fermentation cycle, this is the stage where the boil is forcibly stopped to see if the vessel will shatter. This is the anti-ferment. Fermentation requires warmth to move the red tie through the grain. The House of Cold is designed to lock the hinge. It wants to turn the twins' blood into slush and their joints into static limestone. When these crystals touch the skin, they don't melt. They try to seize the heat. They act like tiny heat sinks, pulling the its out of the twins' skin and turning the surrounding flesh into a blue-gray crust. The twins weren't just standing in a room. We were being flash-chilled. The lords wanted to see if our batch was strong enough to stay liquid in the heart of a glacier, or if we would settle into a permanent frozen silence. To survive, the twins do not try to fight the cold. They perform a deep pitch. They had begun to make a low-frequency hum, an internal bell song that creates enough friction in their blood to keep it from slushing. They tell the cold, "You can freeze the shell, but you cannot reach the yeast." They essentially turn themselves into high-proof spirit, which has a freezing point far lower than the thin batches of the common dead. The jaguars are about the dehusking of the maize. This is where the underworld tries to grind the grain to see if there is any noticeable soul left inside the husk. By staying fluid in the House of Cold, the twins prove their proof is too high to be conquered by physics. Frustrated, the lords move them to the House of Jaguars, where the audit becomes predatory. It is a room of low-frequency purring that vibrates the twins' teeth. This purr is a counter-frequency to the bell song, designed to shake the batch until the vessel cracks from the inside out. The House of Jaguars was a shifting wall of black on black, illuminated only by the neon green slits of their eyes. We could hear the snick of obsidian claws against the limestone, the sound of the world's milling stone being sharpened. The jaguars move in a rhythmic circular pattern, a whirlpool of fur and glass, designed to mill the twins into a fine powder that can be easily siphoned into the corner vents. To survive the House of the Jaguar, the twins do not fight the cats. They perform a substitution of the batch. They speak to the jaguars, offering them bones from the leftovers of the fathers, or hollowed-out gourds filled with red-tie decoys. While the jaguars were busy grinding the false batch, the twins remained still and silent. By becoming noticeably non-reactive, they drop out of the tally. The jaguars' foxfire eyes cannot see them if they don't vibrate. Twins prove they are unbreakable grain. This forces the lords to move to the most terrifying trial of all, the House of Bats, where the lumberjack himself sends his flying blades to strike at the hinge. This house is about severing the hinge. This is where the lumberjack of bones sends his most refined tools, not to grind, but to prune. These bats in the house, their wings are not skin, but thin sheets of bruised obsidian that whistle a dissonant chord as they cut the air. This is the high-frequency bell song, a sound so sharp it can unstitch a soul. But in this dark house, to lift one's head is to offer the hinge, the neck, to the lumberjack's blade. Here, the twins had to become noticeably flat, to embed so deep into the silt of the floor that the bat's sonar found nothing but stone. 1 inch of ego, one bubble of pride rising too high, and the lumberjack would harvest the twins' heads like ripe fruit from the world tree. Hunahpu peeks out of his breathing tube to see if the sun has risen, and the Camazotz slices his head off. This is the necessary sacrifice. The twins realize that to win the tally, one of them must become a decoy batch. Hunahpu's head is taken to the ball court to be used as the ball. The red tie is exposed. The lumberjack thinks he has won. He thinks he has finally pruned the lineage. Xbalanque realizes that for the red tie to survive, he must perform a head space swap. He needs to convince the lords of Xibalba that they have already harvested the prime batch, Hunahpu's head, while he secretly matures a new one. He chooses a turtle with a shell of obsidian gray calcium, a creature whose exterior is already noticeably hardened against the siphon. He places the turtle where his brother's head once was. He then pitches his own red tie into the turtle, using his life force as a starter culture to bind the turtle to Hunahpu's neck. The turtle shell begins to glow with a muted amber, the its pulsing through the ancient cracks in its carapace. To the lords watching through the foxfire, it looks like a head re-thickening. Meanwhile, the lords have taken Hunahpu's actual head, the true ferment, to the center of the quincunx to use as the ball. It is no longer just bone and hair. It is a vibrating sphere of pure its. Every time the lords hit it, they are tapping the keg, trying to drain the solar heat out of it. The deception. Xbalanque has sealed the head from afar. He makes the lords think they are playing with a spent husk by coating the head in gray silt and rabbit vapor. They think they are kicking around a cold audit, but the fire is still burning deep inside the marrow. During the game, Xbalanque orchestrates a noticeable moment of chaos. He uses a rabbit, a creature of the moon in the fast sip, to create a distraction as the lords chase the rabbit, thinking it is the ball. Xbalanque leaps to the center of the court. He snatches the true head and replaces it with the turtle. The turtle is the perfect false batch. When the lords eventually kick it, it doesn't bleed. It just shatters into stone. The red tie is gone, and the lords are left holding a handful of gray silt while Hunahpu is rebottled and made whole again. Xbalanque worked in the blind sip of the shadows, his hands moving with the precision of a master distiller. He didn't just fix his brother, he grafted him. He took the cold, hard logic of the turtle and fused it to the hot, screaming its of Hunahpu's body. When the lords finally struck the ball, they didn't hear the bell song of a soul, they heard the hollow thud of a dry gourd. The lumberjack had been cheated. He had harvested the shadow, while the true batch was already being corked and hidden for the final eruption. When the twins entered the House of Knives, Hunahpu was in a state of transitional fermentation. Because his head was a grafted turtle shell, he had no soft hinge, neck, for the obsidian blades to find. The knives kept sipping at the air around his shoulders, but they found only the cold calcium of the shell. He was a noticeably different kind of target. He didn't have the pulse that the blades were trained to harvest. Xbalanque used his own red tie to create a heat shield that covered both of them. Hunahpu followed his brother's rhythm, moving like a shadow. They beat the knives together because the batch was now a single, shared organism. The House of Hot, Rakshaha, tried to boil the glue that held the turtle shell to his neck. If the heat got too high, the graft would fail, and his spirit would leak out of the open wound. Xbalanque performed a live seal. As the room turned into a kiln of scathing steam, Xbalanque used the moisture of the room to cauterize the connection. By the time they exited the hothouse and stood before the great oven, the twins were no longer human in the way they started. Hunahpu was a Frankenstein of the vat, part boy, part obsidian, turtle, held together by sheer willpower and high-proof spirit. Xbalanque was the master of the valve, exhausted from maintaining the pressure of two souls in one red tie. They emerged from the hothouse looking like scorched earth. Hunahpu's turtle head was glowing a dull radioactive orange, and his skin was noticeably glazed like a kailine-fired jar. They had survived the knives and the heat, but they were no longer raw grain. They had been milled, chilled, sliced, and boiled. They were now a finished wash, ready to be thrown into the oven. for the final distillation into light. Because Hunahpu made it through these houses, he proved to the lords of Xibalba that death is just a change in the vessel. The fact that a decapitated boy could walk through a kiln and a knife storm was the final proof that the twins had mastered the hinge. The lords realized that to destroy this batch, they couldn't just audit it, they had to incinerate it. They ordered the construction of a massive pit, a great oven. They lined the pit with noticeably heavy limestone and filled it with branches of the copal tree, which burns with a thick, resinous smoke. The air around the pit smelled of burning bone and sweet incense. This is the final pitch. The lords were creating a heat so intense it would unmake the atoms of the twins' red tie. The lords didn't drag the twins to the fire. They invited them to a feast. They challenged the twins to a game of leaping over the fire. They said, "Come, let us see if your its is as strong as you claim. Jump across the mouth of the oven." The twins knew this was the end of the liquid phase. They looked at the fire and saw it, not as a death, but as the distillation column, the voluntary distillation. Without hesitating, the twins held hands, Hunahpu with his glowing turtle head and Xbalanque with his skin like Killine-fired clay. They didn't jump over the fire, they jumped into it. The moment they hit the white-hot stones, their husks, the physical bodies, were consumed instantly. The turtle head shattered, the skin vanished, and the red tie was released from the bottle of the flesh. Then a massive column of white smoke erupted from the pit. To the lords, it looked like a successful kill. The lords cheered as the twins vanished into the white-hot roar of the pib. They saw the husks blacken and curl, and they smelled the final sip of the batch evaporating into the ceiling of the underworld. They thought the tally was closed. They thought the lumberjack finally had his wood. But they didn't see the gold vapor rising through the smoke, a spirit so refined it was no longer subject to the gray siphon. The twins hadn't died. They had just changed state. The lords took the ashes and the spent bones of the twins and ground them into a fine powder, throwing them into the river of Xibalba. They thought this was the disposal of the waste. They didn't realize that in the water, the yeast of the twins would re-pitch itself. On the 5th day of the twins' death, the Lord's messengers looked into the water and saw two strange creatures. They didn't see boys, they saw man, fish. They had the faces of the twins, but their bodies were slick, gray, and whiskered like catfish. In the master's logic, the catfish is the scavenger of the silt. By taking this form, the twins proved they could now survive in the very gray silt that usually kills the living. The catfish didn't stay fish for long. They re-pitched themselves again, emerging from the water as two ragged, traveling miracle workers. They looked like spent souls beggars in rags. They began performing miracles for the people of Xibalba. They were the miracle brew that could die and be reborn in the same breath. And the lords of Xibalba were so blinded by the trick that they didn't realize they were inviting their own final audit into the house. The lords leaned forward from their thrones of bone, their foxfire eyes glowing with a manic green light. They say, "Do us next. Process our red tie, so that we may know the secret of the eternal batch." They are asking the master of fermentation to put them in the vat, thinking they are the prime grain when they are actually the bitter lees. In the previous tricks, the twins would whistle the bell song to call the pieces back together. But for the High Lords, the twins remain silent. The Lord's pieces lie on the floor of the quincunx. The underworld waits for the rebottling. The air becomes noticeably cold and flat. Without the twins' whistle, there is no yeast to jumpstart the Lord's life. The Lords of Xibalba do not rise. They remain as spent silt on the floor. Their red tie is not recycled. It is simply extinguished. The hierarchy of the underworld collapses because the hinges of the High Lords have been permanently broken. The twins stood over the broken batch of the kings. There was no whistle, no prayer, and no second sip. The lords had asked to be processed, and the twins had complied. They had turned them into static silt. For the first time in an age, the gray siphon had nothing to pull. The lumberjack of Bones was now just Bones himself. The twins looked at the remaining lords, the lesser audits, and told them, "From now on, the tally is changed. You will no longer take the prime grain. You will only take the chaff." The twins walk out of the 9th level, passing through the quincunx one last time. They are no longer catfish men or beggars. They are pure solar energy. They rise through the vat of the world and emerge into the sky. To commemorate this, the Mayan people, they take yellow and white corn and brew the tally batch. They use the prime grain of the highlands, which had been blessed by the new sun, Hunahpu. They added a drop of wild honey, symbolizing the sweetness that the twins had successfully defended from the sour audit of Xibalba. As the mixture began to bubble, it didn't hiss like the House of Hot. It emitted a soft, rhythmic chime, the first surface version of the bell song. The liquid was noticeably clear at the top, but glowing with an amber pulse at the bottom. It looked like the sun rising out of a golden silt. The people gathered at the edge of the quincunx. They didn't drink to forget. They drank to remember the pressure. When the liquid hit their tongues, it felt like a flash of the House of Hot, followed by the cool of the moon. It didn't make them dull or heavy. It made their red tie vibrate. It re-pitched their spirits, ensuring that even when they eventually died and went to the underworld, they would carry enough internal heat to survive this strainer. The first jar wasn't made of clay. It was made of victory. Ancient Maya watched the froth rise like the white smoke of the great oven, but there was no scent of burning, only the aroma of living malt. When they lifted the cup, then looked at the sun and the moon and whispered the new tally, Mayans drank the it that the lords could not steal. Mayans were no longer just lumber for Yum Camille's tree. We were the master batch, and our souls were now noticeably too hot for the silt to hold. The twins became the celestial counting system we use today. This is why you must never forget to count the days. The twins are the ones moving the hands of the clock. The grand heat, or the sun. Hunahpu tracks the 365-day solar cycle. The cool guard, or the moon. Xbalanque tracks the 260-day sacred cycle, the Tzolk'in. When these two cycles align, the hinge of the great cycle turns. As long as they are in the sky does not fall. They are the permanent sunbird and moon watcher perched on the summit. The next time you look at a tool, or a monkey in the treetops, or the smoke of a cigar, remember, the twilight is only one broken hinge away, and the Mox Way is always looking for a knot to untie. But the Maya didn't just live in fear of the untying. They obsessed over the binding. They knew that if the king could master the leap of the hinge, he could act as a permanent anchor for his people, holding the world steady from the other side. They didn't just leave this to chance. They carved the instructions into the very bones of the earth. We didn't fully understand the scale of this spiritual engineering until we literally peeled back the floor of the jungle. In 1950, out within the jungle of Chiapas, Alberto Ruiz Luye found the tomb of King Pacal. He spent many weeks documenting the son Canbalam's ambition to create a symbol. When Alberto Ruiz Luye opened Pacal's sarcophagus in 1952, he found a polished jade bead resting where the king's tongue used to be. The jade seed was a perpetual ration, because jade represents maize, the green of the corn. The soul could sip on the essence of the stone for eternity. This ensured the spirit remained high-proof and didn't have to sell its red tie to Yum Camille just to avoid hunger. As the life heat left the body, the priests placed the jade seed into the king's hinge. It was the ultimate cork. When Kimil leaned over the sarcophagus, his rotten snake scent ready to dissolve the marrow, he found the way barred by a cold green fire. He couldn't audit a soul that was anchored to a stone breath. The king's spirit was already siphoning itself upward to Orion, leaving Kimil to chew on a pebble of jade that would never turn to silt. The vessel was sealed. The vessel was sealed. The batch was saved. On the sarcophagus read cinnabar in powdered form, Xbalanque II etched the sarcophagus with imagery to immortalize his father's successful leap on the hinge. Following King Pakal's death, his son Xbalanque II spent decades expanding this sacred landscape. He has constructed the triad of temples to prove his legitimacy. King Xbalanque II secures his own right to rule as the successor to a god. The discovery revolutionized the understanding of the classic Maya period. It confirmed that Maya pyramids, like Egyptian ones, could serve as funerary monuments for royalty. Found with epigraphic and bioarchaeological markers, it was confirmed that King Pakal died at age 80, within the year 683 AD, as portrayed in the historical records. The sarcophagus of King Pakal. The lid of Pakal's tomb is the visual map of paying the kieks, blood tax. Below him, the skeletal jaws of the white-boned centipede. Above him, the world tree, the center. Pakal is balanced on the hinge. He is caught in the split second where the soul is weighed against the earth. The hero twins are present as the midwives of the hinge. They are the cosmic engineers of this resurrection. The water bearer. As Pakal prepares to leap from the underworld, the water bearer pours sacred ink. Just as water softens the earth, so a sprout can break through. This twin lubricates the spiritual gears. He ensures that the soul doesn't get stuck in the transition between the underworld and the sky. The other twin beats a steady rhythm, the heartbeat of the universe. This drum provides the temporal coordinate. The beat Pakal must follow to successfully execute the leap from the centipede's jaws to the branches of the world tree. The leap of the hinge requires perfect synchronization. If the king jumps too early, he falls back into the centipede's jaws. Too late, and the window of the twilight closes. The drum represents the first sound and the last sound. In Maya creation stories, the world was spoken or beaten into existence. When they assist Pakal on his sarcophagus, they are acting as flight controllers. They are guiding him through the hinge moment, that thin, purple gold, in-between space where the rules of physics and death don't apply. While the drums beat below, the hero twins have finished their audit of the 9 levels. They now lead the soul, the refined, high-proof spirit, away from the spent grain of the earth and toward the celestial hearth. They navigate the thin air toward Orion, the great fire of the sky. Here, the 3 hearthstones, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, pulse with the raw heat of the first pitch. This is the fire of creation, the cosmic oven where souls are no longer milled but transmuted. It is a dance between worlds, the liquid soul merging with the solar vapor. As the soul enters the hearth, the twins begin to fade. Their roles as midwives of the descent complete. They become the noticeable silence between the stars, leaving the soul to burn as a permanent light in the constellation of the turtle. Below, in Chiapas, the humid vat of the lowlands, Xbalanque II stands as the master of the surface. He observes the construction of the city not as a ruler of men, but as an architect of the hinge. The sweat glistening on the workers' backs is the first dew, the salt of a living ferment. As they drag colossal stones, the heavy grain of the earth, the drums pulse with the bell song of labor. This rhythm isn't just for pace. It is a frequency meant to keep the gray siphon of the underworld from pulling at the workers' heels. The triad of temples rises like 3 monumental jars. Each stone laid is a noticeable seal, a testament to his father Pakau's legacy and a promise that the batch of Xbalanque will not sour. Xbalanque's gaze is unwavering. He is the lid on the city, ensuring the sky vault remains pressurized and the heavens do not collapse into the silt. Xbalanque II raises his arms, his jeweled bracelets catching the high-proof light of the sun. He feels the red tie of the cosmos flowing through his marrow, a direct siphon from the hearthstones of Orion to the limestone floor of Palenque. Standing at the summit of the Temple of the Cross, the king prepares to move the its from his body into the stone. He uses a lancet of obsidian, the same stinging glass used in the House of Knives, but here it is used for consecration, not harvest. He draws the red tie from his tongue and his hinge. This is the prime starter culture. As the blood falls onto the bark paper, it is not seen as a loss, but as a pitching of the batch. The king performs this at each of the 3 temples, creating a triangulated frequency. Temple of the Sun seals the heat, the internal fire of the people. Temple of the Cross seals the axis, the hinge between the sky and the silt. Temple of the Foliated Cross seals the growth, the fermentation of the corn. The drums grow louder, a heartbeat shared between the workers in the mud and the stars in the void. The city rises, a perfect vessel of stone, proving to the lords of the underworld that the lumberjacks shall have no harvest here. The sky is held fast, the batch is secure. As the ritual concludes, a noticeable vibration hums through the plaza. To those with the master's sight, the city no longer looks like mere rock. It glows with a muted amber aura, a protective glaze that mimics the shell of the turtle. The foxfire of Xibalba cannot penetrate this light. The lumberjack finds no grip on these stones. The lumberjack may wait at the bottom of the hill with his bone saw, but he only inherits the lees. The prime spirit belongs to the Sunday. We are the master batch, and the fermentation never ends. Okay, I'm heading back inside before the owls start their shift.